Hey, biology. I want to take a second to look at this leaf. So if you pull, this is a pothos leaf. This is a common houseplant that's kind of ivy-like that people get for their homes. Very easy to grow. If you look at the top of this leaf, you'll notice it's really shiny. If you look at the bottom of this leaf, you'll notice it's sort of shiny, but not so much. That shine is the waxy cuticle. And so it makes sense that the top is more waxy than the bottom of this leaf, and we'll see why. You can also see that there's all these veins running through it. We'll talk, you guys know about the xylem and the phloem. The xylem pulls the water up from the roots and goes into the leaf and distributes the water through the leaf and any nutrients that's also being pulled up from the roots. And the phloem is going to go back in the opposite direction, taking the sugar that's produced in this leaf. And how does that get produced? Well, we have to take a look. Oh, we can't see it. It's so small. We can't actually get a good read of what's happening here inside the sleeve unless we do some magnification using a microscope. And I don't know, looking at some magnification numbers by doing some total magnification, figure out what's going on. But since I don't have a microscope, let's draw what's happening here. So like I said, the very top layer that you see on a leaf, that kind of shininess, that's called the cuticle. And the whole point of the cuticle is to provide, so this is a cuticle, that provides a waterproof layer. So a waxy, waterproof substance that protects the leaf from water loss. Protects from water loss. Okay, it's kind of like if you were to put lotion on your skin. Okay, so lotion doesn't add water to the skin, it just protects from evaporation. Very different. Okay, right under that we have these, they're represented as either circles or squares. It actually doesn't matter that much, but they're very, very tightly packed epidermal cells. Epidermis. And these are non-photosynthetic cells. These are cells that protect the leaf from microbes and, again, water loss. Very important. There's no chloroplast in these cells. They're very generalized, just kind of protection cells. Okay, they're kind of like, again, like they're called epidermal cells because they're like our epidermal cells. They just add a layer of protection. But then we get into the epidural cells, and these are the cells, sorry, not the epidermal cells, the palisade mesophyll cells. And these are the cells, when we talked early in the semester about different cell types, and we compared bacteria, plant, and animal cells, when we talked about the plant cells, we overgeneralized, but we were mostly talking about palisade cells, okay? So these are the cells that have, so this is a cell layer. Okay. So these are the palisade cells. Palisade, mesophyll layer. And so these cells have a big central vacuole, okay? And those are all about water protection, okay? So let's draw one of these palisade cells. So the palisade cell has a vacuole, which does water storage and also waste storage, but it mostly is lots of water storage. It has this cell wall, and what the cell wall does is it provides structure for the cell. And you'll notice in the palisade cells, it's very important that they are these long, tall cells. They have almost no space between them. They use as much space as possible so that they no sun. Okay, so yeah, so no energy coming in gets lost by going between the cells. So you maximize volume by having a sphere, but you maximize area use by having this rectangular shape. Okay, so we also have the nucleus, which is where the DNA is stored. But we also have, very importantly, two very important organelles, the mitochondria, which kind of looks like this. Remember, the mitochondria has that inner layer. Okay, mitochondria. And we also have chloroplasts in here, okay? So the chloroplasts are sort of bean-looking, and they have these stacks of molecules we didn't get a chance to talk about, but this is the chloroplasts. And the chloroplasts are the site of photosynthesis. Synthesis. Just like how the mitochondria is the site of the last two steps of I lost that pen. Where did it go? Whatever. The mitochondria is the site of the Krebs cycle. Krebs, and the electron transport chain, the chloroplast is the site of photosynthesis. So very, very important. That's better. Focus is better now. Okay, so you have these big cells. They have their vacuoles. Okay, cool. They're full of those chloroplasts. And the thing is, these cells are there's so much chloroplast in here. They're just jam-packed. They might have some mitochondria, but they're mostly just jam-packed with chloroplasts because they're really trying to maximize the sunlight energy that's getting in here. I'm not going to keep doing that. So the point being that sunlight energy, so if this is the sun, like we drew it when we were kids in the corner, all that sunlight is going to be coming down. It's going to go through the waxy cuticle and the epidermal cells, but it's going to hit the palisade cells. Okay, and when it hits the palisade cells, photosynthesis can occur, and we'll talk about that in a second. Let's keep going through this leaf layer. Okay, so the next layer down, those are your spongy mesophyll cells. So these are circular, and they're not as closely packed. So they're spherical so that they can absorb as much water as possible. They can maximize that volume, but they are loosely packed because the space in between them becomes the airspace, or is airspace. So, airspace. And this is called the spongy mesophyll because it is spongy. Okay, it's kind of got a sponginess to it. Spongy mesophyll. Use a different pen for this. So, these cells, this layer does not much photosynthesis. Usually almost no photosynthesis. Some plants do have some. So there's not much photosynthesis, but they provide space for air. Provide airspace. They also can contain water. Contain water, because as we know, you need water for photosynthesis. Okay, let me see if I can, nope, okay. All right, so then what's underneath that? Underneath that, we have, again, that epidermal layer. Okay. La la la. Epidermal layer. Oh, but wait, in this case, the epidermal layer leaves some space for these guard cells. Okay, so these are guard cells. Let's see, let's put one right here, a pair right here. And when the guard cells are open, when open, you get a stoma. And the stoma is the pore that lets in gases, that allows gas exchange to occur. Okay, so the guard cells open and close. Okay, the guard cells are open during the day. Sorry, they're open at night. They're closed during the day. Because the other thing that can come in and out of that airspace is water vapor. Okay, so if water vapor is escaping, the plant is losing water, and the plants want to maximize water loss. Or sorry, they want to minimize water loss. So how can a plant minimize water loss? One thing is you can close the guard cells. Guard cells, closed. In day. It's hotter during the day. That means that if you have your guard cells closed, you're not losing water because it'll have a faster evaporation rate during the day. The next thing is that you have that waxy cuticle layer. So the reason why the bottom of that leaf was less shiny is because it has to allow spots for those guard cells. So there's just so where did my leaf go? There's just less of that wax on this side of the leaf because there has to be spaces for those stoma and those guard cells than there is on the top side of the leaf. All right, so what else do those stoma do? Those stoma, okay, what else? Let's start with this. So, minimize water loss. You can close the guard cells during the day. You have the waxy cuticle, prevents water loss. You also have those giant vacuoles inside the cells. So the vacuoles contain water, as much water as possible. And then so do the spongy mesophyll cells. Store water. 2. Awesome. Okay, cool. So what else is happening here? So we know, what's the overall equation for photosynthesis? Photosynthesis. We know it takes sunlight energy, and it takes carbon dioxide and water And the plant does a whole bunch of stuff that we didn't get time to go into, but what it produces is oxygen as a waste product and glucose, which is not a waste product. It's very important. And so that sunlight energy gets used to make glucose. That glucose, importantly, is then used in respiration. And it's that breakdown of glucose and the resulting pyruvates and carbon dioxides that provide the energy to make ATP. So it's happening at the same time. So it's using glycolysis to produce ATP, and then the Krebs cycle and the electron transport cycle to create even more ATP. So this can either be done in plants directly, in the plant's mitochondria. Don't forget, plants have mitochondria. Or in animals that eat the plants. That eat plants. Or in carnivores that eat plants that have already eaten. Carnivores that eat animals that have already eaten plants. They're just one step removed. And when we get to ecology, we'll talk about how that's it's less efficient, but it doesn't mean it doesn't happen. That eat animals that eat plants. And there's a lot more, but that's all you really need to worry about here. But you can see that ultimately all the energy that goes into everything is coming from the sun. So first it has to get put into glucose, and then it goes into respiration to make ATP, either in the plant directly or in an animal that's eaten that plant material. Let's see, what else? Let's talk about, okay, so where does this CO2 come from? The CO2 comes from the air, okay? So it's in the atmosphere. And it's taken in through the stoma. Comes in through stomata. Remember that stomata is plural of stoma, okay? So CO2 comes in and hangs out in that airspace, okay? But only at night, okay? But photosynthesis has to happen during the day because it requires sunlight energy. So that airspace is critical for storing that CO2 until photosynthesis can occur. The other thing that happens is we know that oxygen is produced by photosynthesis. So this is also stored in airspace until night, when it can be released. When it is released. Okay, what else happens? Some of that oxygen is also used in respiration. Okay, what about this water? So that water is coming up from roots. Coming up from roots through or via the xylem. So we could have drawn this big old vein way up here. It's surrounded by those bundle sheath cells. So the bundle sheath is not super important to know, but the bundle sheath cells are the ones that contain the vein. And then within the vein, we have the xylem and the phloem. Okay, so they're just these tubes. If we're looking through the leaf this way, you can actually kind of, if you open this up this way, you can see, oh, there's a bunch of goo and sap. What is that? Well, that is a mixture of the water that's flowing up from the leaves and the sugar solution that's coming out, or sorry, the water flowing up from the roots and the sugar solution leaving the leaf, okay? So the xylem, we'll say those are the red ones. The xylem moves the water from roots, moves water from the roots to the shoots, as the biologists say, or to the leaves, as non-biologists say. And then you have the xylem in there too. And the xylem, again, are a bunch of tubes that are facing this way, or sorry, the phloem. And this moves the sugar from the leaf to the rest of plant. Okay, so that sugar is required. That glucose that is made during photosynthesis is required for everything the plant does, for creating reproductive structures, for creating more growth, even for building more leaves. That sugar has to go to another part of the plant so it can do stuff. Once you get that leaf, you can't really do anything else. It's already been differentiated as much as it can be. All it is a solar panel for the plant to then use to pull in, to create sugar to be used by the rest of the plant. Let's see, what other fun things do we need to know about the leaf? I think that's about it. So make sure you go back and check those respiration videos we've already made. Think about ATP and have a good day. Bye.